Ron, I believe we have a quorum. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We have 5 individuals here, including Mr. Jay Lucas, who is an alternate. I'd like to declare the meeting as open. And this is the United States. Let's salute the flag, please, first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Before we go any further here, I'd like to ask the members of the committee, do any of you have any conflict of interest or anything that might even appear to be a conflict of interest that would keep you from rendering a fair decision here?
No, sir. No.
Nor do I. Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, if I may interject, my understanding is, having just gotten here, that one of the ETJ member of the Board of Adjustment was not able to be here today.
That's correct.
And the alternate is who?
It's Mr. Lucas.
Mr. Lucas, who is not in the ETJ. He's in the town's proper limits. And so I think that's perfectly legal, but given that we have 2 applicants for variances today, I'd like to know if any of them have any objections to the fact that there is not an ETJ member on the Board of Adjustment today. Extraterritorial jurisdiction. It's the 1 mile outside of this town's proper limits. Scanning the audience, I see no one saying they have an objection, and so with that, I think we're free to proceed if there's no conflicts of interest.
There are none.
Okay.
Thank you, Grady. I appreciate that. So I believe you've all had an opportunity to review the agenda. Are there any amendments or changes or corrections to the agenda?
No, sir.
No.
Okay. I guess we need to vote to accept the agenda. So I'd make that proposal.
Move.
Thank you, sir. We have a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, then all in favor of the agenda, please signal aye. Thank you. Okay, the first item that we have to do is to approve the minutes of the September 18th, 2023 meeting. I believe that those are in good order, but I would take comments from any member of the committee. Bill?
Down in the section where it was talking about the information required of the applicant to come back for that meeting, number 2 says a footprint of the property established 1,000 square feet within, I believe the word should be objective to minimize the setback variance as opposed to objection.
You are correct.
And that's basically it.
And actually, that should be a 1,000 square foot footprint.
Footprint.
It's
yeah.
the building, not the parcel.
It's not the total of the. Correct.
Okay. Are there any other comments or corrections? I'll work with Kimberly to make sure that those changes are made. Presuming that those changes are made, do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll move that.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Jay, thank you for the second. Discussion? All those in favor of approving those minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay, I believe we have no old business, and today I'd like to open the public hearing because we have 2 pieces of variance proposals for us to consider. Ron, would you like to go over the issue?
Sure. I'd be glad to go just introduce the site. A little bit of kitchen. I don't know how you guys normally do this, so
I'm highly reliant on staff.
no worries.
So what I would suggest is we just deal with variance 2024-01 first.
Correct.
Yes.
And this is a quasi-judicial proceeding. So staff needs to be sworn in, and anyone speaking or thinks that they might need to speak for or against the first variance needs to be sworn in before the hearing gets underway.
Okay. Thank you. I guess we need to swear Ron in. Kimberly, if you can do that, I guess you got a Bible over there, I hope.
Are the applicants here for James and Maureen Elliott here, and anybody on their behalf regarding this application. Okay, then they also need to be sworn in, assuming they're going to put on their evidence in support of their variance. Anyone who wishes to speak in any capacity regarding variance 2024-01, application by James and Maureen Elliott seeking an up to 20-foot variance from section 3.6M.1A swimming pools and to allow a swimming pool within 5 feet from the rear property line regarding a property location at 617 Ox Cart Place should get sworn in. We cannot have you testify without being sworn in. Of course. Should be the right. Mhm.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give shall be the truth, nothing but the truth, under penalty of perjury?
Thank you all. Grady, thank you for your help there.
Sir. So I think what we'll do is begin with Mr. Satterfield, giving the staff presentation. At the conclusion of that, it would be my position to move staff's report and summary into the record as Exhibit 1 collectively, absent any objections from anyone.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. We are here today to talk about property located at 617 Ox Cart Place. This particular property is the end of the cul-de-sac there within the Planters Ridge subdivision, and it's about 0.33 acres in size. Subject property, and there is a typo in the case summary. I would like to correct that. The subject property is zoned MR3 residential and not MB3 mainland business, as shown in the staff report. I apologize for that error. So we have Mr. and Mrs. Elliott. They're proposing to construct a 12-foot by 26-foot rectangular swimming pool and requesting a variance to allow the swimming pool to be within, I put as close as 5 feet to the rear setback. It was not real clear to me on the site plan that was provided exactly what your setback would be. Section 3.6 M1A requires that swimming pools be subject to the principal structure setback for the zoning district in which is located. And you provided those setbacks in the case summary for you. And I'm available for any questions that you may have at this time. But Mr. and Mrs. Elliott are here for their presentation and any evidence they want to provide, and staff does not provide a recommendation on this.
Correct. Thank you, sir.
I have a question. I'm not clear on what is being requested. I see the minimum rear setback of 25 feet. So they are seeking to put within that 25-foot setback a 20-foot wide pool?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So as I view this from the site plan, they are seeking to build a 12 by 26-foot pool and seeking to get a variance from the current 25-foot setback requirement so that they could move it as much as 5 feet to the property line.
I see 12 by 36.
Yeah, it's 12 by,
that's another typographical
that was one of the
error.
errors too, so it's 12 by 26.
Okay. And, there's another one at the top of the page, too.
12 by 26 there as well.
It should be 12 by 26.
Yes, and when we write the order, either for or against approval or denial on this one, we'll make sure that is correct in the order.
So what was the narrative aspect about how it's, let me use the correct terminology here, requires swimming pools to be subject to the principal structure setbacks? What does that mean?
So the swimming pool is considered to be an accessory structure, but the UDO is very clear that a swimming pool has to live by the setbacks for a principal structure, not an accessory structure. Great, if this is helpful. That's good. Yeah, I just thought it'd be easier for you.
And as the chair just stated, if I can just restate, section M for swimming pools and hot tubs, 1A says a swimming pool shall be subject to the principal structure setbacks for the district in which it is located. That's been interpreted that I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, which means that the pool should be considered the exterior of the home for purposes of calculating a setback. Okay.
Correct. So we've interpreted that this pool would have to meet that same setback as the principal structure, or should be calculated as exterior, as you just stated.
Okay, Mr. and Miss Elliott, would you like to address?
Let me.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. I don't usually get this active,
that's
but
okay.
it'll help. Does anyone on the board have any questions of staff at this point regarding staff summary and the materials for this variance?
No.
And then absent any objections from the applicants or anyone else in the audience, I would move the entirety of staff's summary and presentation and facts into the record as Exhibit 1 collectively. And so,
With the correction for the
of course,
size of the pool.
well, that and the mainland residential
And-
versus mainland
correct.
business, those revisions for the typos, I would move that into the record as Exhibit 1. Is there any objection to that?
There's none. I'll second that motion if you need a second.
Well, I'm sounds good.
Yep.
Well, actually, I'm moving it into the record. So if there's no objections, then you, Mr. Chairman, should be have the ability to accept it into the record.
So moved.
Okay, so accepted.
So accepted.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. and Mrs. Elliott, if you would like to come to the board and present your case as to why you believe you should get a variance.
Good morning. Thank you. I wasn't prepared to speak today. The pool builder was going to come today, so I apologize. I'm a little nervous with this. Wasn't familiar with the whole process. When we first moved here, we originally, years ago, before we moved here from Winston-Salem up from Orlando, and pools there were an accessory structure, and we were familiar with a 5-foot setback. So when we started this process, we gave a letter to each of our neighbors adjacent behind us and beside us to make sure they wouldn't object to a pool at all. And they signed those letters, and it's part of the information we provided to you. So we thought, yeah, well, we're good now. We can just go ahead and start the permitting process. And then we found out that this is considered part of the home after our conversations with Mr. Satterfield. So in essence, our house is on a cul-de-sac, and the house is pushed back pretty far, which leaves us no room except that area of the 25 feet setback. And so we just said, well, we'll just go ahead and see if we can get a variance and have our pool. We do have a community pool. My wife has immune disease, and so she's she does get ear infections and other things from the public pool. So a private pool for us would have been ideal, but we understand the process and the approvals. So we're just here hoping we can do that. So that's really all I had to say.
Miss Elliott?
I pretty much agree with what he said. I don't know. I mean, if you guys have questions, we can answer them. I don't know what I'm supposed to,
Okay.
say with it. I mean, we went through, the pool builder is on his way. So he has all the information about all, that stuff. But, we just did, like Jim said, what we thought was, here he is right now. To get everything approved and stuff. Went through the HOA. We told them we were coming to you guys for variance and stuff. So they were waiting to see what you guys had said on the variance as well.
Yes, you've been sworn in. Would you like to come up and address as a part of the open hearing?
Thank you.
or- Excuse me.
I'm sorry. I have some questions,
We have
Mr.
some.
Chairman. We have to understand what the applicant is asking for, which I think we do, but we also have to understand the reasons they're asking for a variance from the town's UDO standards.
Yeah.
Okay. And I also have to satisfy myself that the application has satisfied the technical notification requirements. So my first question is to Mr. Satterfield. Has all notifications been properly sent to adjacent or nearby property owners as required under the UDO.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hold on, no ma'am. You can have your say in a second, okay? But as far as from what you've seen in the materials, have letters been sent notifying adjacent property owners by the Elliots of their requested variance application from what you've seen based on the letters?
My understanding, staff sent the adjacent letters
Okay,
on behalf to advertise this meeting. They were not sent by the Elliots, but they were sent by staff.
okay, so
Lisa's going to go grab the list, but we did send, and I did get a phone call from one neighbor that did receive something in the packet.
but the applicant themselves are not required to
Correct.
send out notifications.
Correct.
But there are letters in the packet that seems to suggest that the Elliots sent letters to certain property owners.
They sought, I don't know if they sent letters, but they definitely sought support from their neighbors, and that information is provided in the packet. And I don't know that all the neighbors who are adjacent receive that, have provided that support, but there are several, 3 or 4 in the packet that have
Okay.
provided some level of support in their letters.
Has staff, to your knowledge, received any objections to the Elliots application?
I have received one phone call from a resident to the rear who was concerned with the placement of the pool.
Do you recall the name of that
Uh,
individual?
Give me a minute, I can. I don't remember the name, but let me look on if I see the name.
But the substance of the objection was what?
They were concerned with being able to see a swimming pool while they are in their backyard or on their in the back of their house, enjoying a cup of coffee and being able to see a swimming pool, regardless of its location and regardless of a fence.
To your knowledge, is there anyone in the audience that the telephone call?
It was a telephone call.
Anyone in the audience that made that telephone call to Mr. Satterfield noting the objections to the Elliott swimming pool?
Right.
Okay,
It was
so
concerned.
okay,
From them.
for purposes of the record, the reason I keep cutting you off is because we've got to have you recorded in front of a microphone after you've identified yourself. So for the record, there appears to be an individual in the audience who has been sworn in, who will be given a chance to speak about this application, who indicates that she or her husband were the ones to call Mr. Satterfield, and we'll talk about that shortly. So
And also, for advertising purposes, Mr. Richardson, maybe you'll get to this question. A sign was also placed on the property. That would have been, sorry for the dates.
while Mr. Satterfield's looking at the dates the sign was placed on the property, Mr. and Mrs. Elliott, do you understand that an application for a variance requires may be approved by the Board of Adjustment if the board concludes all of the following findings of fact are met? Number one, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. It shall not be necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of the variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. So with respect to that first requirement, either one of you or both can answer. What do you contend? And I'm looking at your application. What do you contend is the unnecessary hardship? What I have in your application is that the denial of the variance will place an unnecessary hardship on the owners because you want a swimming pool for the leisure, well-being, and personal health.
Yeah, as I stated, my wife has immune disease, so us going to the pool or her going to the pool, she's prone to ear infections and other issues with a public pool. And having a pool at the house, she can get her exercise and do the things, water aerobics that she needs to do to maintain her health.
Does any of what you just testified about result from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as its location, size, or topography?
Being a pie-shaped lot, our house is set back very far. We have a long driveway and it sets back, which puts us very close into that 25-foot setback, leaving no room for a pool.
And I take it that, given what you just said about Mrs. Elliott, personal circumstances would be her health as the reason why you're also wanting to build this pool.
Yes.
Did you build the house on a pie-shaped lot?
It was built, we found it, it was still it had been constructed. Riptide built the home. And not being aware of the 25-foot setback, we thought that was for the building only and not for a structure such as a pool. So we had no concern because we were planning on putting a pool in. And then we found out after talking to Mr. Satterfield and going online and looking at the ordinances here that the pool was included as part of the home. So that's why we started the application.
How long have you owned the home?
We've been in 4 years permanently.
Does the board have any other questions at this time of the applicants?
Go ahead, Craig.
In the 4 years that you've owned the house, what have you done for swimming and water aerobics?
We haven't. We haven't. We do bike rides and walks around the neighborhood, but it's just something we had planned. So,
Craig?
Was the property bought in 2019?
Yes,
2019,
And when did you move in full-time?
2020.
2020, a year later. We were going back and forth from Winston for a year.
A year later, you moved in full-time.
Yes.
Basically, I had the same question as Bruce.
Mr.
I
Warner?
have a question. I didn't notice, and I was wondering if you actually had prepared it, the impervious worksheet, which is required you do have it. I didn't
Yes.
see it in here. In our application.
Our builder came in. Do you have that? Do you want me to get that for you?
Hold on for a second.
It should be in.
Anyone who hasn't been sworn in that's being asked to speak, including your pool contractor, must be sworn in to give testimony today.
Well, I was going to give the testimony. I was going to ask
Okay.
if he had
All right?
his.
Well, he can be sworn in if you want him to speak. Of course. Okay, then if you want him to be, it's your burden. I know you're not lawyers and I don't want you to be nervous, but at the end of the day, you're coming in and asking this board for an exception to the UDO. So it's your burden to be an advocate for yourselves as to why this board should grant you a variance. And if that means putting on your pool contractor, then you need to do that.
You have a copy of it? Yeah.
You're sworn in.
Sworn in.
Gonna need a Bible.
Oops.
The truth, nothing but the truth, and the penalty of perjury.
Will you
I just
please
turned-
state your full name for the record, sir?
James A. Amenta.
Was an impervious surface calculation done, Mr. Amenta?
Yes, yes, it was.
You highlight or summarize that for us, or tell us the details at least.
Okay, so the house itself is 2895. The driveways, these are all square footages. Driveway's 1542. The front sidewalk's 141. The total existing impervious area is 4578. The impervious area after the pool construction, we're going to add 76 square feet for the coping. Impervious area of pavers will be 350. So the total added BUA after construction is 426. So the total impervious area after pool construction will be 5,004 square feet. Total allocated is 6,500 square feet. Total square foot area of the lot is 14,366. Percentage of BUA for that lot 68 is 35%. So we're under the allowed BUA.
Thank you.
Mr. Armenta, while you're sworn in and speaking, I'd just like to ask you a question. Do you know when the UDO for the town of Sunset Beach was initially promulgated
For this house,
for Sunset Beach as a whole?
repeat the question, please.
So do you know when the UDO for the town of Sunset Beach was originally put in place?
No, sir, I don't.
That's 2012. It predates the acquisition of this property by 7 years. As a pool contractor, were you aware of the rear setback requirements when you contracted with the Elliots?
Yes, sir, I was.
And did you advise them that they were planning a pool in a setback that was not allowed by the town UDO?
We knew that the setback was 25 feet, but we submitted the permit and the application understanding that other pools in the neighborhood were within that 25 foot, so we thought there would be an exception.
So are you aware that if there are other pools, that those may have been built before the UDO and were therefore grandfathered?
No,
And
sir,
that
I did.
Yeah, their existence did not necessarily guarantee or suggest that a variance would be available.
Yeah, I didn't know that. No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Armenta, have you ever moved on behalf of property owners for a variance to build a pool in the town of Sunset Beach prior to this one?
No, sir.
Have you built pools in the town of Sunset Beach since 2012?
No, sir.
Have you charged any money to the Elliots in furtherance of this pool?
We had a down payment paid, yes, sir, for the contract.
How much was that?
$45,000.
And is that down payment refundable?
Yes.
Does the board have any other questions of Mr. Armenta at this time?
Gentlemen, no? Mr. Armenta, thank you for your testimony.
Mr. and Mrs. Elliott, do you have anything further to add to Mr. Armenta's testimony or your prior testimony?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in furtherance of this application by the Elliots? Yes, ma'am.
When you approach the microphone, you please give your full name and address.
Sure. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Good.
Yes, my name is Lynn Evans, and my husband Bill and I live at 211 Planters Ridge Drive, which is an adjacent property to the rear and to the side of the Elliots. Prior to my regular remarks, the first that we heard of the pool was the letter that we received, which was a week prior to this meeting from the city. We did not get any requests from the Elliots for support, as it appears some of the other adjacent properties did. That's just one note. So the first we heard of it was last week. And then after receiving that letter, we made a phone call to Mr. Satterfield just for some clarification as to what was happening, since we knew nothing about it. So we weren't calling with an objection per se, sir, but just some clarification. Maureen and Jim, since we became neighbors 5 years ago, we have seen your commitment to high quality in your home and yard. Your deck, your lovely outdoor kitchen, your attractive fence, your sun awning,
your plantings, and your beautiful flower baskets. They truly enhance your home and our neighborhood. The photos that Bill will distribute, either now or after my brief comments.
Allowed to do this?
It's up to the chairman and to whether or not to receive anything into the record as evidence, and then whether, I don't know what they're proffering, but I think that the applicant should be provided the proposed exhibit documentary evidence first to see if they have any objections.
Sure.
And then if they don't, or if they do, then the matter can be heard.
We may accept.
Mhm. You can accept even over an objection.
Mr. and Ms. Elliott, are you okay with this information being distributed to the board? Okay.
So it's, again, because we don't have a microphone, for the record, Mr. and Mrs. Elliott have been shown what appear to be photographs by Mr. and Mrs. Evans, and have no objection to those photographs being received into evidence. Mr. Chairman, do you so receive?
I agree, and we have received these. They are being distributed to the members of the board. These are various pictures
Is it
of
4?
the home and the view outside.
We have 4 photographs we will collectively identify as Exhibit 2 for the record.
I presume that the blue house in the background of these pictures is the Elliott home.
Yes, correct.
Okay, are you finished?
Yes, I'll continue. I
Does
just wanted to
anyone
make sure.
on the board have any questions for this one?
No, I'm still have
She's
some
still
more.
going.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make sure that you had time to look at the photos.
Okay.
The photos that we have just distributed do illustrate that from where these were taken, our primary dining area for all of our meals will have a direct sight line to your yard and therefore your pool. With that in mind, we hope you will consider some plantings that would help mitigate that sight line so we can continue to enjoy the beauty of all our backyards here in our neighborhood. Again, we are just hoping that Maureen and Jim could consider some plantings that might enhance the pool and help mitigate our direct sight line. Thank you very much.
Before you leave, do any members of the board have any questions for these folks?
No.
No question.
Thank you for your
I-
testimony.
I have some questions. So are you objecting to the application, or are you saying that you support the application so long as Mr. and Mrs. Elliott plant a screening of landscaping so as to mitigate the view from your home of their desired pool?
Well, to be honest, since we only had a short week to sort of digest all this and we weren't familiar with zoning, the code you're speaking of, et cetera. So from our standpoint, as just residents of a home nearby, we're really not that familiar with exactly if this is a severe request for a variance or a normal request as homeowners. It was our understanding, I guess, that pools are allowed, and if the pool's going to be there, this is what would help us as neighbors of the pool.
For what it's worth, I've been the town's attorney for 10 years, and I don't know how severe a request this is either, but that's not the measurement. The measurement is whether or not, given the information you have, do you oppose this pool being built in the rear setback? Yes, pools are allowed, but under the UDO, they're allowed to comply so long as they comply with the setback requirements for a yard. This one does not come close to satisfying that setback because the setback's 25 feet that the pool should be out of.
Mhm.
They're proposing to put, I guess, depending on its juxtaposition on the property, the way I read this is, well, I saw somewhere where it was on the order of about 20 feet of the 25 feet.
Correct. It's being 5 feet from the rear property.
And
So, Mr. Amenta, can you come up and explain how much of the rear yard setback this pool is going to encroach upon if built?
the pool is situated would be 16 feet from the property line. So,
So it would occupy 9 feet of the 25-foot buffer.
yes, sir.
I mean, the 25-foot setback.
Yes, sir. So we're not encroaching that close to the property line. We're still 16 feet away. Plus, we have a privacy fence.
Well, the fence is not private right now. From what I see in the
Right.
pictures, it's an iron fence
Right.
with no landscaping and vegetative screening.
Right. As to her question, we can, as part of the contract, put shrubs to mitigate the sight distance to her property. That would be no problem.
So just for the record, the pool is encroaching by 9 feet into the rear yard setback,
Right.
if it's allowed.
If it's allowed, yes, sir.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Thank you. It's, the site plan has provided with the, the pool shown on it. There's a portion of the pool that basically the whole one side of it is in the 25-foot setback, which means that's a minimum of 12 feet at least. And it's encroaching, not 9, as you were just suggesting. And this is maybe a little rough, but how do you address that?
Well, I did do the measurements, when I drew the drawings up and the property line and been out to the site and actually measured everything. So the closest portion of the pool would only be 16 feet from the rear setback.
Okay, that corner?
Yes, sir, that corner.
Okay. Just, it's not written that way on the plan.
I thought I addressed that in the proposal.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Satterfield has something he wishes to say about this setback encroachment.
Thank you. Ms. Satterfield?
What I was going to clarify, the reason why in the advertisement and your packet, I said up to a 20-foot variance. To me, it was unclear exactly what the setback was going to be. The site plan did not show exactly what the setback for the corner of the pool was going to be based on what I pulled off the building permit records. Also doing the math, as the other Board of Adjustment member was looking at, if it's like the corner of the deck is at 25 feet, the pool was 12 foot deep, etc. So to me, it was unclear. Also in their application for the variance, they were outlining why they believed the 5-foot setback should apply as an accessory structure. And so that's where I deducted better advertise more of a variance instead of less of a variance.
Thank you for clarifying that. I'm taking a look at this site plan that was provided to us, and presuming that this is drawn to scale, the 12-foot side appears to be consistent with 12 to 15 feet. I'm not a cartographer, from this rear setback line. So whether it's 12 or 25, and thank you for that clarification, it seems to me that there clearly is an encroachment here into the setback area. And I personally find it hard to imagine that this could be conceived to be a side yard because it is at the rear of the property. Am I viewing this correctly?
Yes, sir. It's at the rear. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask one other question to you, Mr. Amenta. Have you examined the soil conditions of the deck?
What do you mean by examine?
Well, so you've got a deck that is adjacent to the house.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Once again, I'm roughly estimating that if the deck were torn down and these folks wanted a pool, they could move the pool adjacent to the porch and potentially not require a variance and get the pool that they want without them trying to achieve a variance to our UDO. Have you considered that possibility, sir?
My background is I'm a civil engineer, a geotechnical engineer, worked for the federal government for 40 years, so I'm very familiar with soil conditions and excavations. That would be a possibility, but then that would increase the price of removing the deck, moving you know, we could move the pool over, but the increased price may be prohibitive.
I totally understand that. That's not within
But-
our bailiwick here.
Right, but you could do that. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Gentlemen, any other questions while Mr. Amenta's up here?
No.
Mr. and Mrs. Evans, do you have anything that you wish to add to what you've testified about, or any questions for Mr. Amenta or for the Elliots?
Well, sir, I believe you asked me if we objected, so I just wanted to make sure that I answered your question. And no, we do not object to the pool. We just wanted to voice our concerns for the appearance, what it does to our sightline, and hope that there would be some mitigation considered for that.
Well, beyond hope, are you specifically requesting that the applicant install certain vegetative screening of the pool if it's approved?
No.
You're just hoping as a good neighbor.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions for the Evans?
Gentlemen?
Would
Jay?
you, are you objecting to a 5-foot vinyl fence across there? So, I mean, 'cause that would.
I'm sorry, a 5 foot what type
It
of
looks
fence?
like a 5-foot vinyl high fence that would surround the pool.
We haven't seen that photo. We haven't seen any of these things.
Isn't that part of the package?
It is.
I think I saw those pictures, but I was thinking maybe I should have looked closer that those
Okay.
were pictures of other existing.
Yeah, page 4. I mean,
Is that something we were to have seen as adjacent property owners? Because we have not
yeah,
seen that.
you would see that.
We have not seen that packet.
So I'm sorry. In looking at your photographs and seeing the black iron
Mhm.
fence, I was thinking that these vinyl fence pictures were of other pools or other backyards, but maybe I'm mistaken. Mrs. Elliott, do you want to address the fencing issue? Let's see, it will have.
Yeah, we're going to replace, or that the fence that's there now is not appropriate for a pool. It's only 4 feet in height, so we have to replace that.
Okay.
So in replacing it, we're replacing it with a semi-private. It's I believe, a 3.5 inch slat with a 1/2 inch gap between the slats, which is 5 feet, which makes it appropriate for a pool.
What they're, we'll keep them. I just wanted you to be able to see them. Do you have any objections to those? These,
Can I ask a question without being at the mic?
no, well, you can go back to the mic. I just wanted you to see what they're talking about putting here.
Isn't solid.
It's got a little bit of a crack in between them.
Grady, if I may, I'd like to recognize Lisa Anglin.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I have a medical emergency and I need to leave, but you all are in very capable hands.
Thank you.
And Grady and Ron will be able to take care of it.
Godspeed to you.
Thanks.
Ron, while we're at this and discussing this fence, you're the UDO expert. Do we not have something in the UDO about a maximum 4-foot fence?
As I read the UDO and on the mainland district, any zoning district on the mainland can have up to a 6-foot fence for resident. Any residentially zoned property on the mainland can have a 6-foot fence
6 feet. Okay.
per the fence and law requirements. The building code will require at least a 4-foot fence.
Okay. Thank you.
May I
Yes.
speak?
Yes, of course.
Thank you for showing those. That made a big difference. I wish we had seen those prior, because that would definitely be acceptable to us. And if some other plantings could be considered, but we're very used to those types of vinyl fences, and we appreciate seeing those.
Is there anyone else that needs to be sworn in to speak either for or against this proposal? If not, then, Grady, I'd like to close the public hearing.
You need to make a motion to close the public hearing and then
So moved. Second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? If not, then move to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay, I believe we have a substantial amount of information here, and I appreciate the thoroughness with which the Elliots have pursued this. It is now appropriate for us to canvass the members of the Board of Adjustment to determine if they have any other things that they would like to discuss. And I'd start with you, Boomer.
The UDO presently was placed in effect in 2023.
2012.
The current UDO was adopted and became in effect in 2023. Apologize for not knowing the exact date, but the UDO that we're working with right now was the previous UDO was amended, and the one we're currently working with now was effective 2023. I apologize for not knowing the exact date.
Okay, so prior to 2023, this would not have needed a variance.
That I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the old code. I've tried to do a little bit of research as I've also been listening to the testimony, but I don't know that for sure.
So I was assuming that the previous UDO had a 5-foot setback, which is now back to 2012.
I am not certain of that. I had thought that the setback was 25 feet.
So I guess my point is, if they had applied prior to 2023, or when they had first moved in, then this would not be an issue.
That's certainly a conjecture. I don't have my copy of the prior UDO. The simple fact of the matter is, whether or not that's an issue, they're applying in 2024 when the UDO is in place and requires a 25-foot setback from the rear yard.
Okay.
And there's been no evidence received from the applicant as to whether or not the UDO in 2012 versus 2023 changed anything about pools and rear yard setbacks. I don't know if you're able to see any change. I mean, look, I get what you're getting to as well. If in 2012, the rear yard setback would have easily allowed this pool, but now because of a change in 2023, it won't without a variance. I understand that, but it's not your burden to carry for the applicant. You need to make your decision on the current UDO, and the current UDO has a 25 rear yard setback, inclusive of pools being excluded from there. And you have to decide for yourselves whether the applicants have carried their burden for a variance.
Anything else, Greg?
Nope.
Jay, any questions from you?
Nope.
Comments? Bill?
Yes, I personally trying not to disregard the personal issues associated with the pool being a private pool versus a public pool. But I'm sorry, I just do not see an unnecessary hardship being created here. So not in favor.
Okay. Bruce?
Not in favor.
Okay. As you're aware, for us to grant a variance, we would have to find that there was an unnecessary hardship. And I don't believe that there is an unnecessary hardship. I think there are alternatives that these folks could pursue. Once again, my suggestion about potentially demolishing the deck, if it's that important to have a private pool versus a public pool, that's for them to determine. The rules that we work under say that personal circumstances may not be the basis for granting a variance. I feel badly that you have this immune disease, but that's not an issue that we can consider. Thirdly, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant. When you purchased the property, you did not submit a plan to the town that included the pool, and therefore the town has to evaluate the ability to build a pool under the current requirements. You have done a wonderful job trying to establish that violation of the setbacks would not endanger public safety or create an injustice. Okay, I appreciate the fact that you're trying to ameliorate the odor issue by having a saltwater pool, that you are concerned about public safety and will be putting up an appropriate fence. And I understand that you have gone out of your way to get the adjacent property owners to basically say that they're fine with what you're proposing now. I would just suggest to you that there's the possibility that you may change, that the adjacent property owners may change, and that issues regarding noise, view, as the Evans have brought up, are significant issues. The reason we have setbacks in our UDO, or we want to essentially ensure that things like noise and odors, EMS and fire access and the like are all properly taken care of. And that's the reason that this 25-foot setback exists. I'm sorry, to me, you have not met the burden of proof that this is a side yard setback, as stated in your application. This is clearly a rear yard setback, and I personally am unmoved, notwithstanding all the work that you've done here. So if there's any other further discussion of the board, I'd like to call the question in terms of the variance that has been required here. And Ron, before we do that, do you have any other observations that may be helpful?
No, sir.
Thank you. I'm sorry? I do not believe that it has to be done in that order. Okay.
So, may I interject? May I interject?
Certainly.
Okay. The board, if you wish to make a motion to deny the variance request, my preference would be that you identify one or more of the 4 requirements for a variance. It's on page 3 of staff's report. The motion needs to recite whether or not the applicant's satisfied 3A, unnecessary hardship; 3B, the hardship results from conditions peculiar to the property; 3C, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant, etc., or 3D, the requested variance being consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent. Ideally, would like to have a motion that says, if you're going to deny it, on which of those 4 bases, it can be one or more, the motion is being made under. If you wish to approve the variance application, you should likewise find that it satisfies. The motion should say, based on the fact that the applicant has met their burden of all 4 requirements for a variance, my motion is to approve it. So just want to make sure that that's going to be addressed in your motion.
So thank you, Grady, for that. Let me propose a motion then. I move that the Board of Adjustment reject this variance request on the grounds that item 3A, unnecessary hardship, has not been proven. Item 3B, hardship resulting from peculiar conditions of the property, has not been met. Item 3C, that this did not result from actions taken by the applicant who knew the rules when they purchased the property. And 3D, that they've not shown that this request is consistent with the spirit of the UDO.
I'll second.
Thank you for that second. Any discussion? Okay, I'd like to poll the members of the committee in terms of whether you approve that motion. Greg?
Approve.
Jay?
Approve.
Bill?
Approve.
Bruce?
Approve.
And I also approve that motion. So notwithstanding your efforts, and I respect the fact that you have gone through all the necessary procedures, and I hope that you can find an appropriate alternative, but this particular variance request is not granted by the board. Mr. Menta, you've been sworn in. Am I allowed to open the public hearing again, or are we done?
So at this point, just for Mr. and Mrs. Elliott, are they also the second application? We're done with the first
There's
application.
a second application coming, but let's, in terms of this first application, I believe Mr. Menta wants to make a comment, and I do not have the ability to reopen the public hearing.
No, the public hearing was ended, and a motion has been made and approved denying the requested variance application. So for that, we're done. What'll happen is that there'll be a written order entered, drafted, entered, and signed, and then mailed to the applicants, which will then set in motion if they wish to further appeal it to the Brunswick County Civil Superior Court.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Menta, my apologies. Okay. We have a second variance request. And once again, Ron, I'd like to recognize you.
I believe likewise we need to be sworn in for this item as well.
Well,
Is that correct?
yes, my fault. Staff needs to be sworn in, and anyone speaking for or against the application submitted by Brian Riker, bearing case file number VAR 2024-02, needs to be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give at this hearing shall be the truth and nothing but the truth and the penalty of perjury?
So similar to the first application, we will have Mr. Satterfield summarize what's in your packet, and then it would be my position to move that into the record collectively as Exhibit 1, and he can answer questions from the board before we go to the applicant.
Thank you. All right, the subject property for the second case is located at 404 35th Street. It is approximately 1/10 of an acre in size, and it is zoned BR2, which is Beach Residential 2 zoning district. So this property is on the beach, to differentiate between this one and the previous one. Applicant is Mr. Brian Riker, and I believe he will speak. He is requesting to erect a 6-foot tall solid vinyl fence, which, if you'll see in the record, has already been constructed. Fences are to be measured from the natural ground level of the property per your UDO. Fences may not exceed 4 feet in height in the BR2 zoning district. There is a retaining wall on the property behind him that Mr. Riker will go into details that play into the reason why he believes a variance should be granted by this board, and he will go into details on that. I believe he has pictures too. In the BR1, BR2, and CR residential zoning districts, a fence or wall may be constructed not to exceed 4 feet in height from the natural ground level. The staff analysis, you see quite a few bullets on this one because I did have some dialogue with the applicant before he got this far, and also will, I think, reiterate that the fence in question has already been erected. And as Mr. Richardson has suggested, I would like to enter our staff this case summary into the record in its entirety. That's
Exhibit
1.
Any objection, Mr. Riker? No, sir. Any objection from the board receiving this into the record as Exhibit 1?
Absolutely, it should be okay.
Okay.
Any members of the board have any questions for Mr. Satterfield before we move forward?
No.
Okay. Then Grady, is it all right if I open the public hearing?
Sure.
Okay. A motion to open the public hearing so that we may get comments from folks who have been sworn in.
Second.
Thank you for the second, Jay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Let's move forward, Mr. Riker.
Yes, sir.
Swear him in.
He's been
Should be
sworn
this
in.
morning.
Okay.
Just state your name for the record and make
Yes,
sure
sir.
you're speaking into that microphone.
Yes, my name's Brian David Riker. I'm the contractor on this property and also the homeowner, my wife and I. So I appreciate your time today, hearing from me regarding my request for a variance. And I guess just let me begin with, because Ron had stated it a couple times that the fence is already erected. There was no attempt on my part to be presumptive or cavalier by putting the fence up. There was just so much back and forth on whether or not I could put a retaining wall and then a 4-foot fence on top of it. As you can see from the record, it was approved, then it was denied, and then it was disapproved. And by the time we got to a point that there was kind of no recourse for me, I continued with my, well, that's not really, I said that improperly. When I got notification from Mr. Williamson that there was a opportunity for a variance that may be open to me, that a neighbor on 38th Street had the same situation as me, and there was a possibility that I could be granted a variance for a 6-foot fence. And I made the decision at that time to, the pool's finished, water's in the pool. I can either put up a 4-foot fence and go against my conscience that it was unsafe, so it's only 1.5 feet above my neighbor's retaining wall. Somebody could easily step over the fence, stumble over the fence. A child could easily go over the fence. So I made the decision to put up the 6-foot fence. And if your ultimate decision is that I've got to take the 6-foot fence down, then I'll take it down. But as a prudent homeowner, I felt like that was my best course of action, to put up a 6-foot fence prior to this variance hearing, and hopefully that the variance will be met, the variance request. So I would like to submit one picture to the board that is probably in the packet, but it's just a better picture that perhaps could identify the situation a little bit.
Was it potentially this one?
Yes, it is
Yeah.
similar to that.
It's your burden. You can tender what you want, and Mr. Chairman can consider whether or not to accept it into record.
And in this case, it may have actually been a
Grady, I'm fine with accepting this. This clarifies what we've seen in the prior submissions.
and
And will that be exhibit 2?
And Mr. Chair, if I may clarify, he provided these pictures via email, and they were embedded in the email message. And when I converted the emails over to a PDF so we could provide them to you, I didn't realize that some of the pictures may have been cut off or whatever. That's my apologize for that.
That's no problem, Ron. I mean, I think it's clear to you, if I can interject this, that you have been working closely with this individual who's concerned about public safety and trying to move this forward as best we can. But the concept of leaving a pool that's complete with water and people around it, I understand why he did what he did, and he did it at his peril. This board in the past, prior to you, has in fact required people to dismantle things that they have done that were not properly approved as a variance.
I have with respect to Exhibit 2, where the orange fencing is, that's the area in question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The neighbor to the rear that has the retaining wall, do they have any objections to your higher fence variance request?
No, sir.
And notification's been sent to all the adjacent property owners under the UDO, Mr. Satterfield?
Yes, sir.
And have you received any objections to this?
I've had one phone call, but I will not classify it as objection. It was someone who was not necessarily adjacent behind them, but their property and Mr. Riker's property met at a point.
Is there anyone here who called Mr. Satterfield with respect to this variance application in the audience today? Seeing none. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Riker?
Mr. Jensen?
No, sir.
Ms. Lucas?
The retaining wall is actually your neighbor's?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, and was there, I guess, if you were requested to put a fence on top of that retaining wall, it'd been on their property, correct?
No, sir. I requested, could I build a similar retaining wall and put a 4-foot fence on top of it? And that request was approved,
Mhm.
and then it was subsequently
Okay,
denied.
what would be the purpose for you to do another retaining wall? I mean, that'd be duplicate. Don't need it.
It didn't make sense to me either.
Okay.
It was just an effort to get a 4-foot fence above his retaining wall.
And the code requires a 4-foot fence from his property, right? From his ground level?
His natural grade.
Yeah, and if he would have put a 4-foot fence in there, his back neighbor would have actually only seen like a 2-foot fence, which would have been terribly unsafe.
Yes, sir, that is the
Yeah,
situation.
I've actually went out and visited this property. You did exactly the right thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Vornum?
The only question I have is, would it be possible to have that fence 3 feet from the retaining wall and be a 4-foot fence?
Yes, sir, it would. Could I respond further to that?
Please.
Okay. I feel like that would be an unnecessary hardship to me, leaving me with 2 foot of space to navigate around the pool, and would leave me with a 3-foot space behind my fence that would be, I think, quite a deterrent to my property value.
Might grow some weeds.
Yeah. Or anything that I had to maintain behind it.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Bruce, any questions?
No.
Mr. Riker, once again, I appreciate you trying to achieve public safety by doing what you did, and the fact that it's clear that you worked with the town staff to try and properly work within our laws. So I thank you for that. I have no further questions about this.
Actually, I'm sorry, I did have one other question.
Sure.
Sorry. I noticed in one of these pictures there was a tape measure showing 48 inches.
Yes, sir.
I presume that's on the neighboring property's side of your current white fence.
I have a better picture
Sure,
of that.
that
also.
too.
Yes, sir.
This is exhibit number 3. I guess.
Bottom and the top of the tape.
For the record, the applicant is tendering another photograph will identify as Exhibit 3. Mr. Chairman, do you accept that into the record?
Yes, I do, sir. Thank you.
I thought that's what it was.
So that is from the back of my fence.
Correct.
From the neighbor's
I see
retaining
it
wall.
now. Right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other questions for the applicant at this time by the board? Thank you, Mr. Riker. Is there anyone here who's wishing to be heard? Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Riker, in support of your application?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there anyone here today that wishes to be heard in opposition to Mr. Riker's application? All right. Seeing none, then, Mr. Chairman, unless the board has any questions of Mr. Riker, or unless he has anything further to add, I think it would be appropriate to close the public hearing.
Gentlemen, I'd like to move to close the public hearing. I thank Mr. Riker for his comments.
I'll second that one.
Bill is seconding that. Appropriate to close the hearing? And all those in favor of closing the hearing, thank you. All right, so, thank you, sir. For us to prove this variance, we would have to meet the 4 tests: unnecessary hardship, hardship resulting from conditions peculiar to the property, hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant, and that the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. Let me start off by saying that I believe that all these tests have been met and that, in my view, Mr. Riker was clear in him trying to protect public safety and properly deal with the issues that having a pool in a public area could be held. So I'm going to ask Bruce if he has any other observations, but I appreciate, even though I am aggrieved by the fact that the fence was built before the variance was approved, I'm still very supportive of your actions, sir.
In my opinion, you do meet the requirement for hardship. And it does result from our conditions peculiar to the property because of the elevation of the adjoining property. I don't believe that you could move the fence inward as was suggested because that would leave a gap that a child could fall into, which would become a safety problem in itself. So
Right.
the solution proposed is the best solution in my opinion. It didn't result from anything you've done. It's peculiar to the property. And I think a variance would be consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. So that's my view.
Thank you for that. Mr. Warnham?
I absolutely agree that it's an unnecessary hardship created by the fact that the retaining wall is there, which we allow offenses to be built on a property line, and the retaining wall just basically blows that up. So that's a hardship condition, I think. So obviously it meets that A, B, and C. And the only thing other than that I'd say is that I did tour the neighborhood as well, and there are a lot of other places where fences are on top of retaining walls, actually, even creating some places where there's, from the one side of the fence is 7 or 8 feet tall. So it's not inconsistent with the neighborhood, is what I'm trying to say. So
Okay.
I'm in favor of the application.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lucas?
I totally agree. I think you met all requirements here from a safety position and probably a liability position as well down the road.
Thank you, sir. Greg?
I agree to approve the variance.
Okay. Ron, any other comments or questions from you?
No, sir, other than just make sure you vote, that we have the supporting facts for your vote.
Right. Brady, any observations or comments?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So in view of the fact that there's been substantial discussion that all of the requirements necessary to approve a variance have been achieved, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this variance. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Bill, thank you. Any discussion, further discussion? Okay. I'd like to canvass the board then. All those in favor of granting the variance, please connote by saying aye.
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 Okay. This variance is granted unanimously. Thank you all for your service here. Before we adjourn, I'd like to point out that I'd previously asked all of you to hold October 9th, which is a Wednesday, available for a meeting. At this point, I am not aware of any submissions that would require an evaluation by this board and a determination of whether or not a variance was necessary. However, we have a new staff member, Ron. We fortunately have Kimberly working with us now, and we're going to check with Wes McLeod, who will work with Ron to ensure that we get some training. It's been a while since we've had a board training exercise. I do not expect that meeting would take more than an hour or so, Ron. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I believe our presentations are typically around an hour, also depending upon questions that may come up.
So I'll be mindful of your time, but I would appreciate you holding that date of October 9th and prepare yourself to receive a formal notification. And once again, I thank you all for your service to the town, protecting the town from liability and protecting its population from danger. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Boomer. Hopefully no more discussion. And all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.